The switch. Fear as love. Growing up in the 1970s, every black child knew what the switch meant. It wasn't just a thin branch cut from a tree. It was a symbol, a warning, a promise that misbehavior had consequences. When your mother told you to go outside and pick your own switch, your stomach dropped. You walked slowly to the nearest tree, examining branches, trying to find one thin enough to not hurt too much, but thick enough that she wouldn't send you back for a bigger one. The switch hung on door hooks, leaned in corners, or sat on top of the refrigerator where you could see it every day. A constant reminder. Sometimes mothers didn't even have to use it. All they had to do was look at it, and you straightened up immediately. The threat alone was enough to correct behavior. But when the switch came down, it came down hard. Legs got striped with welts. You danced and hopped, begging for mercy, promising you'd never do it again. And your mother didn't stop until she was satisfied that the lesson had been learned. Afterward, she'd tell you, "This hurts me more than it hurts you." And you didn't believe her. But years later, when you became a parent yourself, you understood. She wasn't being cruel. She was preparing you for a world that would be far crueler. In the 1970s, this was love, tough love, the kind that stung your skin but protected your future. Parents believed that if they didn't discipline you, the streets would, and the streets didn't use switches. They used bullets, handcuffs, and prison cells. So mothers and fathers hit hard, not out of anger, but out of fear. Fear that their children wouldn't survive in a world designed to destroy them. Today's parents look at that era with horror. Gentle parenting advocates call it trauma. They say hitting children teaches them that violence is acceptable, that it damages their mental health, that it breaks trust between parent and child. And they're not entirely wrong, but they're also not entirely right, because the world black children faced in the 1970s demanded a different kind of preparation. A softer approach might not have kept them alive. The debate rages on. Was the switch child abuse or survival training? Did it protect a generation or traumatize them? The answer, like most things in black parenting, is complicated. It was both. It saved lives, and it left scars. And understanding that requires understanding the world that created it. Respect through fear. I brought you into this world. In the 1970s, respect wasn't requested. It was demanded, and it was enforced through fear. Parents didn't negotiate with their children. They didn't explain their reasoning or ask for input. When a parent spoke, a child obeyed. Immediately, without question, without backtalk. The phrase, "I brought you into this world, and I'll take you out," wasn't a joke. It was a declaration of absolute authority. Parents reminded their children constantly that they owed their very existence to them. Everything you have, everything you are, came from me, and that meant total submission. Children didn't call adults by their first names. It was always "yes ma'am, no sir, Mr. Johnson, Miss Williams." Even neighbors and family friends commanded that level of respect. If an adult told you to do something, you did it. If an adult corrected you, you accepted it. If an adult disciplined you, you took it and thanked them. Talking back was a cardinal sin. Rolling your eyes could get you slapped. Sucking your teeth earned you a backhand. Questioning a parent's decision was unthinkable. The hierarchy was clear. Adults ruled, children obeyed. There was no democracy in the household. It was a benevolent dictatorship where parents held all the power and used it without apology. This created children who were outwardly obedient, but inwardly terrified. They learned to read their parents' moods, to anticipate anger, to make themselves small and quiet, to avoid punishment. They learned that their opinions didn't matter, that their feelings were irrelevant, that survival meant submission. Today's gentle parenting flips this entirely. Modern black parents are told to validate their children's feelings, to explain decisions, to give children agency and choices. Instead of "because I said so," they're encouraged to say, "I understand you're upset, but here's why we're doing this." Instead of demanding blind obedience, they're building mutual respect. Critics of gentle parenting say it's creating entitled, disrespectful children who don't understand authority. They say kids today talk back, challenge adults, and lack discipline. They point to viral videos of children cursing at their parents or throwing tantrums in public and say, "This is what happens when you don't use the belt." But advocates argue that fear-based respect isn't real respect. It's compliance, and compliance ends the moment the threat is removed. They say children raised with gentle parenting develop genuine respect because they're treated with respect. They learn to regulate their emotions instead of suppressing them. They grow into adults who can communicate, set boundaries, and advocate for themselves. The tension between these approaches runs deep in Black communities. Older generations see gentle parenting as weakness. Younger generations see traditional discipline as abuse. And both sides believe they're protecting their children, just in very different ways. The belt, the shoe, the wooden spoon. Weapons of love. Every Black household in the 1970s had an arsenal. Not guns, not knives, but everyday objects transformed into instruments of discipline. The leather belt hanging on the back of the door. The wooden spoon resting in the kitchen drawer. The house shoe sitting by the bed. These weren't just household items. They were symbols of parental authority, ready to be deployed at a moment's notice. The belt was the most feared. Fathers wore thick leather belts that doubled as discipline tools. When a father unbuckled his belt and slowly pulled it through the loops, the sound alone was terrifying. That slow whipping noise as leather slid through denim meant you were in serious trouble. Some fathers folded the belt in half and snapped it together, the crack echoing through the house like a gunshot. That was your final warning. Mothers had their own weapons. The wooden spoon was a classic, small, easy to grab, and surprisingly painful when it connected with the back of a hand or a backside. Mothers kept them in the kitchen, within arm's reach while cooking. If you misbehaved at the dinner table, the spoon came out, no need to even leave the room. The house shoe, or chancla as it's known in Latino households, was uniquely versatile. Mothers had incredible aim. You could be across the room, and she'd throw that shoe with sniper precision, hitting you square in the back of the head, and then she'd make you bring it back to her. The humiliation was part of the punishment. Extension cords, switches, rulers, hairbrushes, anything within reach could become a tool of discipline. Parents didn't plan these moments. They reacted. A child misbehaved, and the nearest object became the instrument of correction. It was spontaneous, often emotional, and always painful. The physical pain was temporary. The welts faded. The bruises healed. But the psychological impact lasted. Children learned to associate misbehavior with pain. They developed hypervigilance, constantly monitoring their parents' moods and reactions. They became experts at reading body language, knowing when to make themselves scarce, when to stay quiet, when to apologize preemptively. Today's parents reject this entirely. Gentle parenting prohibits any form of physical discipline. No spanking, no slapping, no hitting with objects. Instead, discipline comes through natural consequences, timeouts, and conversations. When a child misbehaves, parents are encouraged to get down to the child's level, make eye contact, and calmly explain why the behavior was wrong and what the consequence will be. Critics say this is too soft. They argue that children need to feel immediate consequences for their actions. That pain is a powerful teacher. That removing physical discipline removes a parent's most effective tool. But research tells a different story. Studies show that children who are physically disciplined are more likely to exhibit aggression, anxiety, and depression. They're more likely to use physical violence themselves. They struggle with emotional regulation and have higher rates of mental health issues. Yet many Black adults raised with the belt, the shoe, and the wooden spoon turned out fine. They'll tell you, "I got whooped, and I'm not traumatized." They credit strict discipline with keeping them out of trouble, teaching them respect, and preparing them for life. And they're not wrong. Many did turn out fine, but many others didn't. Many carry trauma they've never addressed. Many struggle with anger management, anxiety, and difficulty forming healthy relationships. The question isn't whether some children survived strict discipline. The question is whether all children thrive under it. And increasingly, the answer is no. Public discipline. Embarrassment as deterrent. In the 1970s, misbehavior in public was met with immediate and public consequences. Parents didn't wait to get home. They didn't pull their child aside for a private conversation. They disciplined right there in the grocery store aisle, on the church steps, in the middle of the street, and nobody intervened. In fact, other adults often nodded in approval. A child acting up in the store might get yanked by the arm, dragged to a corner, and spanked in front of other shoppers. A child talking back in church might get pinched, slapped, or grabbed by the ear and marched outside for a whipping. The embarrassment was part of the punishment. Parents wanted their children to feel shame, to associate public misbehavior with public humiliation. This wasn't considered abuse, it was considered good parenting. Other black parents would see a mother disciplining her child and think, that's how you do it, that's how you keep them in line. Elders would say, you better get that child before I do. And they meant it. Community discipline was expected and accepted. Children learned quickly that misbehaving in public had immediate consequences. They couldn't plead their case, couldn't argue, couldn't escape. The punishment came swiftly and visibly. And the shame of being disciplined in front of strangers was almost worse than the physical pain. Today, public discipline looks completely different. Parents who spank their children in public risk being reported to Child Protective Services. Videos of parents hitting their kids in stores go viral, sparking outrage and investigations. What was once seen as responsible parenting is now seen as potential abuse. Modern black parents navigate this shift carefully. They still need to correct misbehavior in public, but they can't use the methods their parents used, so they've developed new strategies. The stern whisper, the threatening look, the promise of consequences when they get home. And when those don't work, they leave. They abandon the shopping cart, leave the restaurant, exit the event, because staying and disciplining physically could mean losing their children. This creates frustration. Parents feel handcuffed. They watch their children misbehave and feel powerless to stop it without risking intervention from strangers. Meanwhile, their own parents and grandparents criticize them for being too soft, for letting children run wild, for not handling business the way they did. But gentle parenting advocates argue that public humiliation damages children's self-esteem and teaches them that shame is an appropriate response to mistakes. They say children learn better through connection than through embarrassment. That discipline should happen privately, calmly, and with the child's dignity intact. The clash between these philosophies is stark. Older generations see public discipline as necessary correction. Younger generations see it as public shaming, and black parents are caught in the middle, trying to raise well-behaved children without traumatizing them or getting arrested. The village, when everyone had permission to discipline you. In the 1970s, discipline wasn't just a parent's job, it was the community's responsibility. The village raised the child, and the village had permission to correct the child. If you misbehaved at Miss Johnson's house, Miss Johnson didn't call your mother. She disciplined you herself, and when you got home, your mother disciplined you again for embarrassing her. Neighbors watched from windows and porches. They knew every child on the block by name. They knew which house you belonged to, and if they saw you doing something you shouldn't, they intervened. A child cursing in the street might get snatched up by Mr. Brown, marched to their front door, and handed over to their parents with a full report. Teachers had the same authority. If you misbehaved in school, the teacher handled it. She might make you stand in the corner, write lines, or stay after class. And if the offense was serious enough, she might spank you herself with a paddle. Then she'd call your parents, and you'd get it again at home. This collective discipline created accountability. Children couldn't lie about what they did because someone always saw. They couldn't blame others because the adults knew the truth. They couldn't escape consequences because the entire community was invested in their behavior. But it also meant children had no refuge. They were constantly monitored, constantly corrected, constantly judged. Every adult was a potential disciplinarian. Every public space was a place where they could be punished. The pressure to behave was relentless. Today, this village approach has collapsed. Parents are told not to discipline other people's children. Teachers can't use physical punishment. Neighbors who intervene risk being accused of overstepping or worse. The collective responsibility has dissolved into individual parenting, where each family handles discipline privately. This shift has pros and cons. Children have more freedom, more privacy, more protection from overly harsh discipline. But they also lack the consistent accountability that came from community oversight, and parents carry the entire burden alone, without the support and backup the village once provided. Gentle parenting tries to recreate the village through different means. Parenting groups, online communities, and support networks, where parents share strategies and encourage each other. But it's not the same. It's not the neighbor who sees your child misbehaving and corrects them on the spot. It's a digital connection that lacks the immediacy and authority of the old system. Black parents today often feel isolated. They're raising children in a world where the village no longer exists, where they can't rely on others to reinforce their values, where discipline is their responsibility alone. And many miss the collective approach, even as they recognize its flaws. Hard head makes a soft behind. Teaching through pain. Every black child in the 1970s heard the sayings, hard head makes a soft behind. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. You gon' learn today. These weren't jokes, they were philosophies, lessons wrapped in warning. The message was clear. If you don't listen, you'll suffer. Parents believed that pain was the best teacher, that consequences had to hurt to be effective, that children who didn't experience pain when they were young would experience much worse pain when they were older. A spanking at home was mercy compared to what the world would do to a disobedient black child. This wasn't cruelty, it was preparation. Parents saw the world as hostile and unforgiving. They saw police who shot first and asked questions later. They saw teachers who suspended black children at higher rates. They saw employers who wouldn't hire people with attitudes. They saw a justice system that locked up young black men for minor offenses. So they hit. They hit because they loved. They hit because they were terrified. They hit because they believed it was the only way to keep their children alive. Every whooping was a prayer. Please let this hurt enough that the world doesn't hurt you worse. Children didn't understand this at the time. They just knew their parents were mean, that other kids' parents didn't hit like theirs did, that it wasn't fair. But as they grew older, many came to appreciate it. They'd say, my mama didn't play, and that's why I didn't end up dead or in jail. Today's gentle parenting rejects the idea that pain teaches effectively. Research shows that children learn better through positive reinforcement than through punishment. That fear-based discipline creates compliance but not understanding. That pain triggers the brain's fight-or-flight response, making it harder for children to actually learn the lesson being taught. Gentle parents use natural consequences instead. If a child refuses to wear a coat, they get cold and learn to bring the coat next time. If a child doesn't do homework, they face the consequences at school. If a child breaks a toy, they don't get a new one. The lesson comes from experiencing the natural result of their choices, not from parental punishment. Critics argue this is too passive, that natural consequences aren't always enough, that some lessons require immediate and forceful intervention, that a child running toward a busy street doesn't have time to learn from natural consequences. But gentle parenting advocates say there's a difference between protecting a child from danger and using pain as a teaching tool. Grabbing a child to stop them from running into traffic is safety. Spanking them afterward is punishment. One prevents harm, the other inflicts it. The generational divide is stark. Older black parents insist that pain-based discipline worked. Younger parents insist it caused trauma. And both are speaking their truth, because parenting outcomes aren't universal. What saved one child might have broken another. What built character in one might have instilled fear in another. No backtalk. Silencing children's voices. In the 1970s, children were seen but not heard. Their opinions didn't matter. Their feelings were irrelevant. When adults were talking, children stayed quiet. When parents made decisions, children accepted them. There was no discussion, no debate, no negotiation. Backtalk was one of the most serious offenses a child could commit. It didn't matter if the child had a valid point. It didn't matter if the parent was wrong. Questioning authority, defending yourself, or expressing disagreement was met with immediate and severe punishment. A child who said that's not fair might get slapped. A child who said but I didn't do it might get hit harder for lying. A child who tried to explain their side of the story might be told I don't want to hear it and punished anyway. The message was clear. Your voice doesn't count. This created children who learned to suppress their thoughts and feelings, who internalized that their perspective was worthless, who grew into adults who struggled to advocate for themselves, set boundaries, or speak up when something was wrong. But it also created children who learned to navigate authority, who understood that sometimes you have to bite your tongue to survive, who developed the skill of choosing their battles, knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. Today's gentle parenting encourages children to use their voices. Parents are told to listen to their children's perspectives, validate their feelings, and have conversations instead of issuing commands. Even young children are given choices. Do you want to wear the red shirt or the blue shirt? Do you want to clean your room now or after dinner? This approach builds confident children who know their opinions matter, who can express their needs and emotions, who grow into adults capable of healthy communication and self-advocacy. But critics worry it's creating children who don't respect authority, who argue with every instruction, who believe their wants are equal to their parents' rules, who lack the discipline to accept no for an answer. The balance is difficult. How do you raise a child who can speak up for themselves without being disrespectful? How do you validate their feelings while still maintaining parental authority? How do you teach them that their voice matters without teaching them that their voice is the only one that matters? Black parents today are trying to find that balance. They want children who can advocate for themselves in a world that will try to silence them, but they also want children who understand respect, who recognize authority, who know when to listen and when to speak. It's a tightrope walk, and there's no manual for it. Spare the rod, spoil the child. Religion and discipline. For many black families in the 1970s, discipline wasn't just cultural, it was biblical. Proverbs 13:24, whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. This verse was quoted constantly, used to justify physical punishment, to silence critics, to reassure parents that what they were doing was right. The church reinforced this. Pastors preached about discipline from the pulpit. Sunday school teachers taught that obedient children were godly children. Parents who didn't spank were seen as failing in their spiritual duty to raise righteous children. Physical discipline was framed as an act of love. A parent who refused to spank was allowing their child to stray from God's path. A parent who spared the rod was condemning their child to a life of sin and destruction. Hitting your child wasn't abuse. It was obedience to Scripture. This religious justification made it nearly impossible to question. If you criticize someone's parenting, they'd say, "I'm raising my child according to the Bible," and in the black church community, that ended the conversation. Who were you to argue with God's word? Children raised in this environment absorbed the message. They learned that their parents' harshness was holy, that suffering was spiritual, that pain was proof of love, and many internalized a toxic relationship with discipline, where punishment equaled care, and absence of pain meant absence of love. Today, progressive black Christians are reinterpreting these scriptures. They argue that the rod referenced in Proverbs was a shepherd's rod, used to guide sheep, not beat them. That discipline means teaching and correction, not physical punishment. That the Bible's message is love, not violence. Gentle parenting has found support among younger black Christians who see it as more aligned with Jesus' teachings of compassion, patience, and grace. They point to scriptures about treating others as you want to be treated, about love being patient and kind, about not provoking children to anger. But traditional churches push back. They see gentle parenting as worldly, influenced by secular psychology rather than biblical truth. They warn that children raised without physical discipline will rebel against God and authority. They insist that the old ways are God's ways. This creates a deep divide in black religious communities. Families split over parenting philosophies that are tied to their faith. Grandparents refuse to babysit because they can't discipline the way they believe is right. Parents leave churches that criticize their gentle approach. The conflict is painful because it's not just about parenting. It's about faith, identity, and what it means to be a good Christian parent. And there's no easy resolution when both sides believe God is on their side. The code switch, preparing black children for a racist world. The discipline black children received in the 1970s wasn't just about obedience, it was about survival in a racist society. Parents knew their children would face police, teachers, employers, and systems that were biased against them. One wrong move, one moment of defiance, could cost them their lives. This was the unspoken context of every punishment. When a mother told her son, "You can't act like that," she wasn't just correcting behavior. She was teaching him that the world wouldn't tolerate a black child with an attitude. When a father hit his daughter for talking back, he was showing her that disrespect could get her killed if she directed it at the wrong person. Black parents taught their children to code switch, to speak one way at home and another way in white spaces, to suppress anger even when justified, to comply with authority even when that authority was wrong. These weren't just good manners, they were survival skills. The discipline was harsh, because the stakes were life and death. A white child could throw a tantrum in a store and be seen as bratty. A black child throwing a tantrum could be seen as threatening. A white teenager could talk back to a cop and maybe get away with it. A black teenager talking back to a cop could end up shot. So parents drilled obedience into their children with fear and pain. They taught them to say yes, sir, and no, ma'am, to keep their hands visible, to not make sudden movements, to comply first and argue later, if at all. These lessons were delivered with belts and switches because parents believed that pain at home was better than death in the streets. Today's gentle parents face the same racist world, but they're trying different approaches. They teach their children about racism directly. They have conversations about bias, discrimination, and how to navigate dangerous situations. They role-play encounters with police. They build their children's self-esteem so they understand their worth even when the world devalues them. But they're also criticized for being naive, for not preparing their children harshly enough, for raising black children to advocate for themselves in a world that punishes black self-advocacy. Critics say gentle parenting is a privilege that only works when your child isn't at risk of being killed for misbehaving. The tension is real. How do you raise a confident black child who knows their rights without getting them killed for exercising those rights? How do you teach them to respect themselves while also teaching them to submit to unjust authority for their own safety? Some parents try to split the difference. They practice gentle parenting at home, but prepare their children for harsh realities outside. They validate emotions privately, but teach public compliance. They build resilience through love rather than fear. Others believe this is impossible, that you can't protect a black child with gentle parenting, that the world is too dangerous, too racist, too quick to punish black bodies, that fear-based discipline is still necessary. The debate continues, and black parents remain caught between wanting to raise empowered children and wanting to keep those children alive. Breaking the cycle, can gentle parenting work for black families? The biggest question facing black parents today is whether gentle parenting can work for them. It's a philosophy developed largely by white psychologists, tested on white children, and promoted in white parenting spaces. Can it translate to black families facing different challenges, different threats, different histories? Many black parents say no. They argue that gentle parenting doesn't account for racism, that it assumes children will encounter fair, understanding adults in the world, when black children often don't, that it works when teachers give your child the benefit of the doubt, when police treat your child as innocent, when systems are designed to support your family. They point out that white children can afford to make mistakes, to have tantrums, to talk back, to test boundaries, because the consequences are manageable. But black children's mistakes are criminalized. Their tantrums are seen as aggression. Their boundary testing can get them suspended, arrested, or killed. So the argument goes, black children need stricter discipline because they face stricter consequences. They need to be trained more harshly because the world will be harsher to them. Gentle parenting is a luxury black families can't afford. But a growing number of black parents disagree. They're embracing gentle parenting precisely because of racism. They argue that black children already face trauma from living in a racist society, that adding trauma at home through harsh discipline only compounds the damage, that what black children need is a safe space where they're loved, heard, and respected. They point to research showing that trauma accumulates, that children who experience harsh discipline and racism suffer worse mental health outcomes than children who experience racism but have supportive, gentle home environments, that resilience isn't built through pain, it's built through secure attachment, emotional regulation, and unconditional love. These parents are redefining what it means to prepare black children for the world. Instead of hardening them through punishment, they're strengthening them through connection. Instead of teaching fear, they're teaching confidence. Instead of demanding obedience, they're developing critical thinking. They acknowledge the risks. They know their children will face racism, but they believe that children raised with gentle parenting will be better equipped to handle it. Not because they're more compliant, but because they're more resilient. Not because they've been broken and rebuilt, but because they've been nurtured and supported. The results are still emerging. This generation of gently parented black children is still growing up. We don't yet know how they'll navigate a racist world with the tools their parents have given them. We don't know if they'll be safer, more successful, more mentally healthy. But what we do know is this: the old way left scars. It worked for some and broke others. It kept children alive but didn't always teach them to live. It prevented external destruction while sometimes causing internal collapse. And maybe that's enough reason to try something new. Black parenting is evolving, slowly, painfully, with resistance and criticism from all sides. But it's evolving. Parents are questioning the methods they inherited. They're researching alternatives. They're experimenting with gentler approaches while still preparing their children for harsh realities. Some are blending both worlds, taking the wisdom of 1970s discipline, the understanding of cultural context, the awareness of racism, and combining it with the emotional intelligence of gentle parenting. They're creating something new, something that honors their history while protecting their children's future. The conversation isn't over. The debate will continue. Grandparents will criticize. Experts will disagree. Parents will struggle and doubt and try again. But at the center of it all is love. The same love that motivated the belt in 1975 motivates the conversation in 2025. The same desire to protect, to prepare, to give children the best chance at survival and success. The methods may have changed, but the love hasn't. And maybe, just maybe, that love is enough to bridge the gap between generations and find a path forward that honors the past while building a gentler future.